Hello, church. This is Pastor Paul, and I'd like to share with you some thoughts for Tuesday, July 14th, 2020. And today I'd just like to wrap up our discussion of the book, The Trellis and the Vine. There are a few chapters left in the book that we're not going to discuss because they're mainly technical in nature for pastors to implement the vision that the authors are proposing in this book. But today I'd just like to summarize and share a few things. I'd like to begin by sharing how we became reacquainted with this book from an article that was published on the Gospel Coalition's website back on April 6th of this year. The title of the article is "The Decades-Old Ministry Book That Envisioned the Pandemic." And the author of this article begins by quoting from one of the final chapters in the book, The Trellis and the Vine. And here's the quote as it's found in the book. As we write, and this book was published in 2009, the first worrying signs of a swine flu pandemic are making headlines around the world. Imagine that the pandemic swept through your part of the world and that all public assemblies of more than 3 people were banned by the government for reasons of public health and safety. And let's say that due to some catastrophic combination of local circumstances, this ban had to remain in place for 18 months. How would your congregation of 120 members continue to function with no regular church gatherings of any kind and no home groups except for groups of 3? If you were the pastor, what would you do? Well, of course, the scenario that they proposed sounds an awful lot like what we experienced earlier this year. So what does the author propose we do? Well, in the article, the author writes this: almost overnight, our ministry culture has been radically changed by the inability to gather in person. And this could go 2 ways. 1, we could maintain people in a fairly passive, program-centric or pastor-centric attitude towards church by only offering them streamed or online versions of our existing church services and programs. Or 2, we could grasp the opportunity this new moment offers us and begin an overdue culture shift to training our people to minister to one another. And as we've seen as we worked our way through this book, the authors of The Trellis and the Vine claim, and of course I believe the Bible also claims, that the call is for church leaders to train up disciples who will go out and make disciples. And last week in the video we looked at Ephesians 4:11 and 12, where the Apostle Paul says it was He, God, who gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, and some to be pastors and teachers. Why? To prepare God's people for works of service. So in other words, here again, we see this idea that God is calling everyone to be a disciple-making disciple. And I'd like to remind us of the challenge that the authors gave us in chapter 4, the chapter that was called "Is Every Christian a Vine Worker?" And in this chapter, the author reminds us that the work that God is doing today is gathering people into His kingdom through prayerful proclamation of the gospel. And again, the exciting part of this truth is that God wants us to partner with Him. His plan is for us to partner with Him to build His kingdom. And the author shares that there are 2 aspects of proclaiming the gospel. First, we are to speak the word to one another. The author says the central purpose of getting together is mutual encouragement, to spur one another on to love and good works as we wait for the day of Christ. And the second aspect is speaking the word to non-Christians. The author says that the Christian without a missionary heart is an anomaly. The missionary heart will be seen in all kinds of ways: in prayers for the lost, in making sure our behavior offends no one, in gospel conversation with friends at dinner parties, and in making every effort to save some. We are slaves without rights, even though we are free. So as I wrap up this video, I just want to challenge you, and the challenge for the entire church is that we would join together and partner with God in His kingdom building work of changing lives as we proclaim the gospel to one another and to those who need to hear it. So church, I trust that you will have a blessed day today, and I trust that you will have a blessed week. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye.